Who the fuck do you think you were for doing that? It is a total disgrace what you did to this country.
People are so passionate about these topics, and for obvious reasons, people actually lost jobs, health, loved ones, and the list, mental health issues, the list goes on. So I know and understand why this is such a passionate topic. Man, if I had a diary, I wouldn't let none of y'all read it. If he didn't want the information to be out there, shouldn't have been on the government servers. Lesson learned. I wanted to point to the just how triggering this has been for a lot of healthcare workers. So just to jog your memories, because this narrative is a little weird for me when I hear it from Black people, like, do y'all not remember we had to fight for access? Not theories, not conspiracy, actual facts. Hey, you guys, thank you for hopping on with me today. Today was not originally the planned topic for today. And so I'm going to postpone the initial topic for today for the next time because I felt like we really needed to talk about what's facts and what's fiction when it comes to this recent hearing involving Dr. Fauci. Now, initially, when I heard about the hearing, I didn't really know all the details of what was going on. And so I spent some time looking at people's responses and trying to get a sense as to what the hearing was about because I had no intention of really watching the details of it yet. But as I looked at comments, I started to get really concerned because it looked like, one, we forgot a lot of details about what happened during the pandemic. And granted, recall bias is always an issue. This is why we consider that when we are peer reviewing articles, because as you can see, the whole country remembers the pandemic very differently. And so, because of that, I thought it was really important to kind of remind us of some of the facts and to really talk about some of the rumors, myths. This video is to lay down what really are the facts with regards to what we all went through, right? And thankfully, all survived. For those of you who have lost loved ones, my condolences to you, to all of my colleagues out there, from anesthesiologists to emergency medicine to respiratory therapists to the intensivists that really took on the brunt of the frontline care and our EMS workers and nursing, the whole shebang. We are so indebted to you guys for all that you've endured. I too am a frontline worker and definitely was working during the pandemic, but my exposure was nothing compared to my colleagues in medicine. And I too am grateful for what they endured. That a lot of us didn't have to, and also still mindful of the things that we all endured because it wasn't easy to go out to work every day, not knowing whether or not you were either going to come back with the virus or not even come back at all. So I'm not diminishing by any means the exposure and the experience of other clinicians who may not have been on the front line, but are still frontline workers like myself. But to God be the glory, we all survived. For those who've lost, my heart goes out to them. That being said, before we get into the details, because I'm not gonna go through everything because we'll be here all day and I don't have that kind of time. So I just want to hit on some really key redundant points, things that keep coming up. But before I do so, if you are on here for the very first time, please go ahead and click the subscribe button if you haven't done so before. Give us a thumbs up and click that bell so you get notification anytime I drop a new episode like today when it's unexpected. You would want to know when I drop those episodes. And so thank you for joining the Healthy Bump Club community. Village is what we call ourselves, a HBC Village. And for those who are returning, once again, you guys are superstars, and we're so thankful for your presence each and every time we drop a new episode. So let's get into it. So you guys, one of the things that I wanted to highlight, and it may seem silly, but when I tell you this point is so important for us to still remind ourselves. The United States was not the only country that experienced COVID. COVID was a pandemic because it impacted millions of people across the entire world. That is important to know. Again, COVID was not an isolated experience in the United States. COVID and the subsequent pandemic meant that millions of people, millions of families, millions of healthcare workers were impacted across the entire world. That's point number one. Point number two, because it was a worldwide experience, it required the coordination of many experts. Dr. Anthony Fauci is not the only expert in infectious diseases, virology, or any related fields. I'm going to repeat that again. Dr. Fauci, while very well respected and renowned for his work, especially on HIV, talk about that in a second, he is not the only expert, and the experts coordinated care and frequently communicated in order to make effective strategies to combat and protect the millions of people across this entire world. Billions, I should say. So now that we've gotten those two foundational facts cleared, let's get into some of the other details. And just so you guys know, I'm going to be checking my notes because I want to make sure I touch on as many points as I can. And your girl is not going to remember all the points out of my head doing this very ad lib last minute. So bear with me, okay? I am going to be checking my notes every now and then to make sure I stay on point and that I don't skip some of the important things I do want to talk about. Um, the other thing, the other important thing that people have been discussing is that scientists and researchers have been arrested in other countries. Yes, that is true. Scientists and researchers have been arrested in other countries, but it's not for what you think. So this topic has been brought forth as if there was an arresting of scientists and researchers in other countries because of some deceptive reason when it comes to COVID. But it's because some of them sold life-saving measures, including vaccines. Some actually went up against the government and resisted against the government and whatever their government implementations were. Others had other forms of civil unrest. So there was no widespread arresting of clinicians, scientists across the world simply because of some type of nefarious activity when it comes to deceiving the public about COVID and about the pandemic. It was because of corruptive behavior with regards to selling uh, life-saving measures such as the vaccine and going up against government. As much as we live in a country where we have certain freedoms are not observed in other countries. And so going up against the government or disagreeing with a government's rollout can actually get you in jail in other countries. So it's not what people are saying it was about. Let's move on. And then there's a topic about celebrityhood. And this may hurt some feelings, but it is the fact. While in the United States, as an example, and in many other countries around the world, to be truthful, um, celebrities are revered. There are people who worship celebrityhood. If you think about how much resources, energy are placed into celebrities, from magazine covers to entertainment, news channel interviews to endorsements of products, and the list goes on. Celebrityhood is a money-making field industry, so to speak, right? So for a lot of people, celebrityhood is that pinnacle achievement in life. It is for them the top achievement. Many people also wake up wanting to become a celebrity, wanting to become famous, and that is their life goal. Why I think this is important to say is because in the world of medicine, especially in the scientific aspect of medicine, the research arm of medicine, many people feel very much the same way about getting articles, getting funding for their research, finding out some discovery, some innovation in medicine that's going to save lives, that's going to change lives forever. That is the accolade that's revered, so to speak, in medicine. So for many people in medicine, celebrityhood is below the distinguished level of being a researcher. And I don't mean that to disrespect anybody. It just is what it is. A lot of researchers in medicine are not trying to be famous. They just want to have their research funded, respected, and they want results that actually help people. That is the reward that a lot of researchers seek. It's not celebrityhood. Now, at the same time, if someone does become famous for their work, no one's going to go up against that, so to speak, even though some people don't like that, because a lot of researchers, they're lab rats, right? They like to be in the lab doing their work, and that's what motivates them every day. But if someone does achieve fame, they're going to acknowledge it, right? It's going to be it's going to be a unique experience because for medicine, we don't usually have that type of platform, but in medicine around the entire world, there are researchers that are very well known. And for them, that is their level of fame, even though the public may not be aware of them. Does that make sense? That being said, let's get into some of the things that were in the diary or some of the discussions around the diary. So, as I mentioned, some individuals are very well known within the scientific world and very well respected. Dr. Anthony Fauci has been that for a very long time. Not only has he been respected in the field of medicine for his work with HIV/AIDS and has been considered one of the key individuals whose research led to really combating HIV and getting it to the lower numbers that we are seeing today and allowing individuals to have more fulfilling lives and to look and treat HIV as more of a chronic disease than the death sentence it was in the 1980s, 1990s. So he was already famous. He was also famous because he worked for seven presidents, you guys. Seven presidents worked with Dr. Anthony Fauci. The public wasn't aware of the work he was doing, but he was very instrumental in his role under seven presidents as the head of the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Diseases. This position he resigned from in 2022. So the center of a lot of the discussions currently has to do with Dr. Anthony Fauci's diary being released or portions of the diary being released. So he kept a private journal. So he used the government servers, computers to store his documentation or his journaling. And the length of the journaling started as early as 2001, I believe, and all the way up to 2022. But the center of a lot of this discussion is coming from the entries between 2019 and 2022. Now this includes upwards of 1,000 to 1,500 pages worth of information. And the information was released by Senator Rand Paul, who is the senator that's leading the Homeland and Government Affairs Committee. And he has been focusing on this topic for a very long time. So it's important that you guys know that Dr. Anthony Fauci was questioned on a lot of the questions that were also asked at this hearing in 2021. And I know I saw at least NPR posted some of those clips. So you may want to go if you want to hear more of what his responses were then before he pled the fifth this time. His responses are on these clips and it's very much available for the public. So that's important for you to know. And so getting back to the celebrity topic before I go on to some of the other more important topics with regards to his journaling. So it definitely showed that he made significant documentation about, sort of his acknowledgement and how he was processing his fame. Actually, before I go on, I do want to mention that the journal was released by the so I do want to mention that Senator Rand Paul received access to the journals because the information was released because it was stored on the servers of the government, and it was released by the current Secretary for Health and Human Services, RFK Jr. So keep that in mind, so that all of the moving parts make sense. Um, Now let's get back into that celebrity topic because that's one of the things that has come up. But I think it's probably one of the less important topics with regards to his diary. So yes, it looks like Dr. Anthony Fauci did make several entries about his journey into celebrityhood, meaning public celebrityhood, and was kind of processing not just his national, but his international fame. And among those entries, he made note of, his communication with several celebrities, noted icons in our culture, because this was a new experience for him. Typically, he talks to scientists that no one knows about, but the scientific world does. So I guess he was processing that type of attention. But while he was processing the attention, it didn't seem from what I read so far that he desired or that this was a goal of his, which is the narrative that's being told is that this was a goal of his to become a celebrity. Hey, listen, y'all make me a celebrity tomorrow. That's not my goal. But listen, I'm gonna milk it for everything I can. Okay. I'm just letting y'all know if y'all make me a celebrity tomorrow, y'all gonna see I don't journal, but y'all gonna hear my thoughts about it. I'm gonna share with you on this platform because I can't imagine going from being, while you're known in the scientific world, to kind of be thrusted in front of the entire world and becoming so recognized across the entire world. Now, that came with a lot of negative recognition. Also, let's keep that in mind that one of the reasons why he now requires security, not just for himself, but his daughters, his wife, is because he garnered a lot of negative attention. And some of that negative attention included very concerning desires of individuals when it comes to his life. Read between the lines. If you like what I'm sharing so far, go ahead and click the thumbs up if you haven't already. So, among the celebrities, one that kind of surprised me was that he had a lot of interactions with Stephen Miller's wife, who was pregnant at the time. And he actually documented that he was kind of monitoring her responses and her anxiety about the outbreak. Now, she has had other comments with regards to their interaction. I'm not going to comment on that because I want to focus on the diary specifically and what he documented. But if you want, you can, I guess, listen to her comments. But from his perspective, he seemed concerned with the comments that I read. He seemed concerned. He seemed concerned about how she was processing and dealing with the pandemic and made it his intention to check on her and to check on her well-being. So that's basically all I found in terms of their interaction. I can't read anything more than that because there really wasn't anything more than that. So he liked the attention, doesn't make doesn't necessarily mean that he desired and that this was a goal of his. But like anyone else, if listen, if LL Cool J calls me and say, "Hey, you're doing a good job," that's all I gotta say, okay? If Michelle Obama calls me and tells me you're doing a good job, okay. It just, there are people that you like and respect, not revered, there's a difference, but there are people you like and respect. And if those individuals acknowledge your existence and then give you positive feedback, I'm sure it feels good. Who wouldn't feel good about that? Who would your person be? Drop it in the comments. Let me know who if somebody who's a current celebrity calls you messages you and says you're doing a good job, who would make you feel great? And please don't over spiritualize talking about Jesus. Of course, if Jesus calls any one of us, but he does that already, right? I'm hoping you have a personal relationship with him. But I'm talking about from the earthly experience here. Who would you be like, oh, that was really cool that that person called me? And don't act like there isn't nobody, because I've seen some of y'all when you encountered unexpected, not even major celebs, y'all be acting a little different. So don't try to over spiritualize and don't try to self-righteous yourself. Okay? You know what I mean? So let me know if there is a person and who that person would be. It may be an author, it may be an intellectual, it may be a physiologist, it may be anybody, somebody that is known that if they picked up the phone and called you, who would you be excited to hear from? That's all. We're all human. Sometimes we act a little extra, but we are literally all human. That being said, let's move on. That was fun. Okay, so the relationship between Dr. Fauci and the president at the time, I'm not going to say the name, not out of disrespect, but because certain things get flagged for weird reasons. So the president at the time, clearly we all saw and witnessed that there was a lot of tension in that relationship. I think we all noticed it, and I don't think we needed his diary to tell us that. And that at certain points, there was a little bit of a tug of war between their recommendations. Now, to remind us, the president at that time did recommend things like hydroxychloroquine as a treatment. He did also include bleach, which I think is the famous comment that everybody often remembers. So disinfectants and UV lights. Those were his remedies to the pandemic. He did want to reopen schools, and I think this was definitely one of the key factors in what caused such discordance in their relationship. So clearly, Dr. Fauci had a few choice words to discuss, and not, rude words, but he had a few choice comments about how he felt about the president as an individual. So that being said, I'm not sure what else to say about that. I'm not surprised. I'm sure you're not surprised. One of the things that did surprise me is the fact that a lot of Black people are saying that they pushed the vaccines on us, and are kind of nosediving into those conspiracy theories. Even though we talked about this on our platform before, the one of the key individuals in the development of the vaccine was a Black woman. But that didn't seem to matter. But let me remind you guys of something, which I think is very key, and not many people talk about this. One, the origin of vaccines in the United States, period, was a Black man. Period. Go learn your history. So vaccines originated from a Black man. It was a Black man's discovery that led to a lot of the vaccines that we have today. Don't forget that important history, because they're going to try to twist and turn, but we gonna remind you of that history. But number two, I personally remember being very frustrated with the rollout of vaccines because I wasn't seeing the vaccines come to our communities. I vividly remember that this was a key point of irritation for me. So I do think that there has to be accountability for a lot of things that were done during the pandemic. But in the process of holding people accountable, we must have the facts so that it makes sense what we're saying. And so that the accountability would actually lead to us doing better in the future. Does that make sense? So I literally remember that the only reason, especially I think it started in the epicenter, if I'm remembering correctly, the epicenter, which was New York, there was a lot of controversy because a lot of minority neighborhoods initially with the outbreak was not getting access to the vaccines. So no boo-boo, and I'm not saying that to be disrespectful, I'm saying that to be cultural. We were not top on the list when it comes to getting us the vaccines. It was because of the exposure that happened that led to us getting access to the vaccines. That's what happened. So they were not pushing it on our communities. I don't know who y'all think they were pushing it on, but it wasn't us. We had to fight for access to the vaccines. There was a lot of nonprofit organizations who had to fight and expose the fact that there was disparity in terms of who was getting access to the vaccine, even though our communities were the worst impact. So just to jog your memories, because this narrative is a little weird for me when I hear it from Black people, like, do y'all not remember we had to fight for access? They weren't trying to give it to us. Something that should be discussed though. But let's move on to some other topics. Okay. Because I don't want to keep y'all here too long, but I definitely want to cover a lot of key things that are coming up that people are talking about. And okay, so the origin was another one. I'm looking at my notes because I'm trying to stay on track. So the origin of the vaccine is another topic. So this is still a topic of ongoing discussion. That's number one that you guys should know. There are no solid conclusions. I will say from a lot of the reports and experts, and I will tag some experts below, people who actually know the science and have been following the pandemic for a long time. But the majority of experts do believe that this was a naturally occurring virus. Now, in Dr. Fauci's diary, there was a lot of documentation about these discussions, about the fact that he met with top scientists in other countries. And he did make mention that several of them did believe that the virus was possibly a deliberate insertion. So he definitely acknowledged that there was dissension about where the origin or what people believe or what the experts believed was the origin of the vaccine. But he never concluded that the vaccine, or that he thought that the vaccine was as a result of the research done in the lab in Wuhan. But what's important to know in his January 26, 2020 entry, he did acknowledge that he thought that Wuhan market was perhaps not the origin, but an amplifier of the virus. So there's a lot of rumors going around, but just to make sure we're on the same page as to what's actually in the diary. Now, people are drawing their own conclusions because, I could say one statement and 10 people are going to hear different things. But what he actually wrote was that there was dissension about the origin. He still believed that the information available or the data available leans towards a naturally occurring virus, most oftenly deriving from animal to human transmission, that Wuhan market was probably an amplifier, and that there was some dissent or disagreement among top scientists in the world. So that's basically all he wrote. Now you can draw your own conclusions. I'm not here to tell you what to believe, but that's what he wrote. So we got to at least all start off with the same foundation, believe, you know, what is actually written. So, or at least conclude that we're reading the same sentences and the same reports. That being said, that's definitely one thing that's one thing that I felt needs to be clarified. He didn't draw conclusions. The jury is not out on whether or not it was man-made or whether or not it was derived from naturally occurring origins. But the far majority of the data seems to lean towards a naturally occurring origin. Okay. I just want to make sure so the other topic that's important is the school closures. So yes, Dr. Fauci did document that he definitely had discussions with some key state, local government officials, of which included Bill, I'll be forgetting his name, which included, I don't know why, which included Bill de Blasio, who was the mayor of New York City at the time. Now, remember, New York City was the epicenter. New York City were the ones who were experiencing bodies in freezers because there was such a mass amount of unaliving as a result of the virus. So just to remind us, how things rolled out. But he also spoke to Governor Gavin Newsom at the time, and he also spoke to Governor Ron DeSantis. Those were at least some of the most notable individuals that was documented in the diary that he had discussions with. Now, here's the difference. While he documented speaking to these individuals, he did not document or state that he gave them directives. And there was also documentation that he took some of his guidance directly from how China was dealing with the virus at the time. So did he relay that type of information? Absolutely, he did. Did he mandate, or does he have the power to mandate what happens in states? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So the decisions from states definitely included the information they got from him, but he does not have, nor did he have the power to mandate school closures. That was the decision based on local officials, based on the information they received. So that's important for us to clear up. Did he give his interpretation of the scientific data? Yes. The data that was available at the time. Now, 6 years later, we've learned a lot about COVID, a lot more about COVID. And if we were to do it over again, we probably would have different guidelines, strategies to address the virus. But you got to make sure that when we assess accountability, that we take into consideration the information that was available at that time. And so as a result, the major cities all made different decisions as to how they managed the outbreak on the pandemic, but they also relied on his expertise for the scientific information. Another thing that I thought was interesting, going back to the origin that I forgot to mention, was that he definitely documented that he thought that a lot of the push of the lab-borne narrative was in essence to try to get the president reelected. That's an important point to make. Now, y'all, did I go over all my tip? Oh, yes. Another important thing that he said, before I forget, another important thing that he said was that he did document that he expected, I think it was in October 15, 2020, he did document that he expected, this was about the time of the election also, so to give you context, that he did expect a surge in the virus at that time. And the reason behind it was because of the colder weather. He did document that that was his logic, that the colder weather would likely lead to an increase in the virus, which is not surprising if you consider the information and data we have with other viruses, including influenza, which is a seasonal virus. So keep that in mind. Now, can I tell y'all some, y'all know, and please don't get me wrong, I'm not being ageist. I'm being more cohort-ish, if that's a term. But I was cracking up at some of the terminologies that he used in his diary. Man, if I had a diary, I wouldn't let none of y'all read it because you think I do shenanigans now. Man, the thoughts in my head, I want none of y'all to know because I'll be wilding out. Listen, I'll be saying some things to myself. Ooh, y'all are some shady people out there. I'll be dragging some of y'all in my thoughts. Now I'm teasing, I'm teasing. But I definitely won't want nobody to read my diary if I had a diary, because this is shameful. Just the whole experience of it, just the thought of a diary being released, like that is so invasive to me. It's just, but again, at the same time, if he didn't want the information to be out there, shouldn't have been on the government servers. Lesson learned. Okay. Um, and a lesson learned for the entire public. Y'all better learn from that. Don't put stuff on your job servers that you don't want them to have access to. Because when stuff roll down, learn from his experience. Okay. But one of the things, one of the comments he said that the press was hot and heavy for me. That's how, listen, that's how you know he was 79 at the time. Who says hot and heavy? I'm being cohortish as a Gen Xer, and I'm sure some Gen Zs may have thoughts about the things I say. So I'm not shading, just I know people have thoughts about the things and the wordings that I use. And that's just how it goes. But I thought it was also very cute that he said that, I think it was a Washington Post article, that he said it was very flattering. Like how sweet. I love that. I love, like, that just, for me, that just really showed the humanity of him outside of everything else, regardless of what you think about his expertise or his decision making or his strategies, or whether he should have retired or whether he should have been fired. That's all your decision. I'm just laying out the facts for y'all to draw conclusions for yourself. But I love when we highlight the humanity of people because oftentimes when these things come up, people are so passionate about these topics. And for obvious reasons, people actually lost jobs, health, loved ones, and the list, mental health issues, the list goes on. So I know and understand why this is such a passionate topic, but I'm just here to give you all some of the details and some of the facts. Y'all figure things out for yourself. But even more important, before I go, two other things that's not directly, actually maybe three other things. Oh, and I forgot to even comment that the reason I brought that up about his comment with regards to expectation of the surge of the virus during the cold months is because people are concluding that they said that he uh, documented that he didn't believe the vaccines will work. And that's not what he's saying. The people are drawing some interesting conclusions. Y'all just read what people write. English is a hard language. Jeez Louise. But one of the things that I saw that I thought was interesting that came out as a result of this hearing is that it came out that Kelly Paul, which is Rand Paul's wife, and Rand Paul, by the way, is an ophthalmologist. I almost said optometrist. No disrespect to anyone, but he is an ophthalmologist to give you some perspective. And what was interesting is that, because folks will pull out these receipts. That's why you got to be careful how you act in public and who you try to point fingers at. Because the quicker you point fingers at them, people gonna turn around and point fingers at you. Okay, that's something my grandmother used to say. Learn from, yeah, my grandmother said it, my mom said it to me, and clearly I learned it. But you've got to be careful because people will pull receipts, and the internet always has access to receipts. And things that are certain things that are documented are required to be documented by the government. So, as a result of all that went down, people pulled receipts and they found that Kelly Paul, who is Rand Paul's wife, had stock in Gilead Sciences, and Gilead Sciences was the maker of the antiviral drug remdesivir. So take from that what you want, but essentially it did say that she didn't make any earnings, so I guess it wasn't a good investment, but she did invest in stock in the company. Now, I guess it was not a good decision to make that investment because she didn't make money off of it. I'm like, girl, if you're gonna go down with the ship, at least make some money. But she did not make money, but it's not because she didn't invest. She did invest. She just didn't make money off her investments. So there was no earning from it. In fact, I think she lost as a result of the investment. But what people are saying is just the people are pointing to the inconsistencies with sort of this display of rebuke and how people are actually making money. Now, the reason the reason we know that is that they had filed. It caught the attention of people because they had filed a report 16 months late past the 15-day deadline as a result of the Stock Act of 2012. So they had to disclose their stock earnings and purchases, and that's why this information is documented. But the reason why it caught attention is because they filed it late. And as I mentioned, Rand Paul has a history of, kind of his theories behind the virus and has been very vocal with his discontent with Dr. Fauci's management. So take what you may out of that. It is what it is. People are pulling receipts, honey, pulling receipts. And one of the receipts I'm not going to get into is Senator Moreno's personal daughter's history and her issues, because I don't feel like that adds to the current conversation that we're having in terms of validity of information. Now, you can feel free to go look that up and determine what you may from that information and, can draw your own conclusions. But you guys know I respect survivors of DV, and so I'm not going to focus on that for this discussion, if that's okay with y'all. Now, Senator Moreno, they out here pulling your receipts too, because they pulled and found out that Senator Moreno actively participated in a major economic development project involving the sale of the former Pixel paper mill that's based out of Ohio. And the reason why this got attention is because the property was purchased by the US medical glove company to manufacture medical gloves and masks. So there's no report that he actually made money off of that, by the way, but it sounds like he was involved in that sale to some degree. Or the development of the project itself. And the reason why people are pointing to this is because I don't know if you guys remember during the hearing, he was the one who made, certain expletives that really I think shook a lot of people. Um, and then also is someone who shared the story of the woman who got kicked out of a game, her and her son, because they weren't wearing masks. And so people are saying, you're making a lot of noise about the mask, or bringing a lot of attention to the mask policy, but behind the scenes, you're involved in the acquisition of property by the U.S. medical glove company that produces gloves and masks. So it just, yeah, so people are kind of drawing conclusions and pointing to what they feel is a hypocrisy in that. Now, that being said, I want to bring attention to a more serious part of this topic. And some of you may have noticed, not just myself, but a lot of other clinicians have come out, and the majority that I'm seeing are very much in support of Dr. Fauci. But I think even beyond the support and who people are choosing to support in this particular circumstance, I think I wanted to point to the just how triggering this has been for a lot of healthcare workers. So this particular topic, it has been very triggering for a lot of healthcare providers. I think even I got a little triggered initially. And it's simply because a lot of healthcare providers are dealing with still managing the memories of what happened and dealing with the emotions of what happened. But even more seriously, there's a significant portion of healthcare providers, from nurses to therapists to your frontline doctors, who are still dealing with PTSD. And for many people who don't know, PTSD can be triggered by anything. And this particular hearing, the way it was managed and the way it rolled out, and what seemed to be a berating of Dr. Fauci, for a number of reasons, became a triggering event, right? And you're seeing a lot of posts of providers who are posting just their anger and their frustration with the public in dealing with this issue, because it's still very much a part of their everyday lives. And my heart goes out for everyone who is struggling with PTSD from it. Um, it does make a lot of us very passionate about how we feel, because we were on the front line. So we saw what it looked like. We saw what it felt like, right? We know what it sounds like. We dealt with the fears of a lot of you, right? And still had to manage and somehow pull it together in the midst of a very tragic time period. So I would say, please be compassionate. This is not an easy topic for a lot of individuals, and not just healthcare providers, but I'm trying to explain what's going on with our industry, and just why you're seeing so many posts of healthcare providers, many of us who have not said anything personally, even during the time of the pandemic or even in the immediate aftermath of the pandemic. But you're seeing a lot of people speak out now because people have had some time to process. Um, and it just seems like the individuals who were instrumental in the hearing and the words that was said and what was said, um, it just seems very irresponsible to a lot of healthcare workers, because it's such a serious issue and so many people unalived as a result of it. And it's not to say that the public doesn't think it's a serious issue. I'm just letting you know, for people who were actually on the front line, um, it's a different experience and it's hard to explain, but it's just a very different experience. And so when we hear at least the science not being respected, it is frustrating because nobody wants to experience that again. And I will definitely tell you, if that were to happen again, we've already lost a good portion of our healthcare staffing across the country. And I don't know the numbers. I don't know if we'll replace those numbers yet, but I don't know what would happen, but for God's grace. So that being said, I hope that I have addressed a lot of the confusion, brought to you what was actually said and the conclusions some people are drawing and the discordance between the two. So I'm hoping that this helped clear up some, controversy, rumors, myths, whatever the case may be. Now take this information and you can draw your own conclusions about everything. Should he be held accountable? I think we all agree that anyone who's in charge of a major strategy, whether it's in the military, in our infectious disease or health and human services departments, in our research departments, in our budgeting departments, if something happened, there should be accountability, not just implying failure, but in the sense of what did you learn, when did you learn it, how did you address what you learned, those kind of things that we're all accustomed to in our own divisions of the industries and departments. We know how this go down, right? And so there has to always be some level of accountability. And at the same time, we have to be clear on what is reasonable to be accountable for. Again, we have to be clear on what is reasonable to be accountable for, not theories, not conspiracy, actual facts. And then also for us to be able to do better in the future. That really, I think part of the frustration with a lot of healthcare workers, and I should add this part, is because it's felt like nothing was accomplished, right? Nothing was accomplished because in the end, the goal should be preparedness so that we're better prepared because history has shown us this is going to happen again on some level. And so the disappointment and the frustration is that we seem to be focused on more theatrics than we are focused on facts that would lead to us coming up with strategies and preparedness that would help us in the future. So it almost feels like individuals, and I'm not going to point to specific people, but I'm just sharing with y'all the word on the street. It just feels like people really don't value the sacrifice that healthcare workers made. Because if the value of what was sacrificed is high, then there will be so much laser focus on making sure that we are protected and we are able to protect the public if it were to happen in our lifetime. So I hope I cleared that up. Anyway, this is Dr. T. As usual, if you liked this video, you liked what I had to share and say today, give us a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell so you know when we do what? Drop another episode. I thank you so much for joining me today. Let me know in the comments what you think. And I will be posting the episode that was meant for today next week with our student midwife and our current full spectrum doula, holistic healer. You guys know her, Annalisa, will be back next week, God's willing, if y'all don't act up in this coming week. That's the plan. And I hope to see y'all win on the next episode. Thank y'all for, oh, I forgot to say, I'm Dr. TC. I'm totally off script today. I'm Dr. T, the hand behind the handle of Healthy Bump Club right here on YouTube and healthybump.club on Instagram. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope to see y'all next episode. Bye, y'all. This is Dr. T, just a friendly reminder. Don't forget to comment, like, and share. And go ahead, why not? Click that subscribe button. Help us to get to the next 1,000 subscribers. We thank you guys for supporting.